Okay, that was for note and file for us, and we have a second report, and that's the financial report to the 6 months ending December 31st, 2016. And it's Robin again.
Hi. If I could just go back to the last presentation. First, I would like to thank Russ very much. He put a lot of time and effort into this, and I genuinely appreciate getting a third-party perspective. I've been living and breathing Yuba City's finances for so long that, admittedly, I think I'm a bit biased, so I appreciate the third party perspective. Thank you. I apologize for the slides. Our version of PowerPoint and Russ's don't seem to link up real well. We'll get the Adobe posted out on the city's website on the finance page, so it'll be available to anybody that wants to take a look at it. And then lastly, as it relates to the PERS projections that you saw, I do want to let you know that finance calculated them twice. We had Russ calculate them, and we also had the city's financial advisors, NHA, give us some perspective on what they projected that they would be. And city staff sat down with a senior actuary the week before last at the CSMFO conference and reviewed them with him, showed him what we had done using the CalPERS circular letter that they put out, and he was in agreement that our projections were right on with the best available information that's currently available. As the actuaries come out next July, we'll definitely be fine-tuning those, but I felt like I definitely received confirmation from him at the annual conference, so that made me feel much more confident in, frankly, the bad news that we were providing you with tonight. Thank you. With that, I'll move on. My financial report tonight is fairly brief. We've inundated you with financial information already. I will be starting off with the city's general fund and then moving into the city's water and wastewater funds. This is a summary of the general fund budget versus actual at the highest level, including the beginning fund balances as of July 1st, 2016, total revenues and total expenditures and fund balance on a budget basis and through the first 6 months of the fiscal year. The fund balance amount includes only the uncommitted amount. It does not include $715,000, which is committed. So strictly the uncommitted fund balance. The year-to-date amounts are on a cash basis and represent the amounts received for revenue and expended for expenses. As of December 31st, there are no accounting accruals included in this. The original budgeted expenses for fiscal year 16-17 were $40.05 million, just over $40 million. To that, we added $797,000 in grant funds that we also expect to receive revenues for, and $462,000 for purchase order commitments. The total current budgeted expenditures are just above $41.3 million. Since revenues are on a cash basis and property tax revenues aren't received until February and May of each year, our general fund has a net deficit as of December 31st. This is typical and should not be alarming. It merely represents a cash flow issue with the city's pooled cash reserves. It doesn't represent a long-term problem. By the end of the fiscal year, the city will once again have a positive fund balance in the general fund. This shows you in yellow the percentage of budgeted amounts received for each of these top, there's 8 that I'm going to show you, the top 8 revenue sources for the general fund. The yellow is the percentage of the amount budgeted that we've actually received so far year to date through December. The dark blue is the portion remaining that has not been received. Since we're 50% through the fiscal year, you would think that we're under budget on our revenues, but these are pretty typical of the cash flows that we see for our general fund. There's nothing here that alarms me. We received a small payment for property tax revenues halfway through the year, but we receive our first installment in February, so that's typical. By the end of the year, finance projects that property tax revenues will be right on track with what we budgeted. We budgeted for a 4% increase, and assessed values for the general fund increased by 3.95% for the fiscal year. So we'll be right on track with what we projected. and the details of the changes in assessed valuations were included in the written report provided to City Council, so I won't go through those in detail tonight. Sales tax is our number one revenue source for the city's general fund. You can see from looking here on a cash basis, I think our battery's dying. Thank you, Terrell. Here we go. On a cash basis, it's been very volatile, and on an adjusted basis, it's a little more uniform. It's still pretty volatile and difficult to project on a go-forward basis. Our projections include a 3.75% increase for this fiscal year. You can see that we only have 1 quarter's worth of data so far. On a cash basis, a negative 0.4, and on an adjusted basis, a positive 0.2. I'm hoping that that's an irregularity and that the future quarters will show the increases that we've projected, but we'll be watching it closely to see if it starts meeting the budget projections or not. The adjusted basis that I show up there includes any double-up payments. It factors in double payments or missed payments by our commercial businesses in town. So it shows us what we can expect when the cash actually catches up with what has happened. Motel surcharge revenues exceeded the 25% expected because as of December 31st, we only had the first quarter receipts. We didn't expect revenues to reach 50% as the December quarter end is paid to the city in January of 2017. Building permit revenues are at 56.1% of budget estimates, showing the increase in development activity. We increased the budget for building permit revenues in fiscal year 16-17 as well, based upon historical trends we've seen the last couple of years. Special police services are 21.5% of the amount budgeted. Business licenses are only at 3.5%, but we're not concerned with the low percentages. We bill typically quarterly for some of the special police services and annually in January for business license revenues. So again, we expect the majority of city general fund revenues will be on track with budget by the time we conclude the end of the fiscal year. As far as expenditures, we've expended 44.5% of the amounts budgeted for salaries and benefits. The savings below 50% is based upon vacancies in almost all cases that Human Resources is in the process of recruiting for. I compared the percentage as of December 31st just to see how we compared with last year as of December 31st. Last year's percentage was higher at 46.6%. So what that tells me is our vacancies are a little bit higher this year than what they were last year as of December 31st. This savings, to me, is an indication that we will once again have a surplus at the end of the fiscal year. But as I look at that, it's definitely one-time savings that we will want to put towards a one-time cost in the future, since it won't be recurring once we fill positions. 49.5% of amounts budgeted for operating expenses have been expended halfway through the year. And in total, general fund expenditures are at 45.1% of the total amount budgeted for the year. Each department's estimated total expenses for fiscal year 16-17 will be submitted to finance with their budget submissions in April. At that point, I can go through and tally up how much the projected savings will be for fiscal year 16-17. This is a summary of the city's unfunded pension liabilities as of June 30th, 2016. It shows you that the safety plan had assets totaling $94 million, miscellaneous had assets totaling $78.9 million, minus the actuarially computed liabilities, which left an unfunded liability for safety of $27.2 million, miscellaneous $30.6 million. And a funded status for safety of 77.5% and 72.1% for miscellaneous, leaving a total net unfunded pension liability of $59 million. With that, I will move on to the city's water fund. This shows you the city's water fund operating revenues are at 50% of budget. The City Council approved the water rate revenue increases in June of 2016. They were effective August 1st of 2016. Those increases weren't read in the meters until September 1st, and then they were billed by finance at the end of September 2016. So we have 3 months worth of data in here of the increases built in. Revenues are right on track with what our budget projections were for the end of the fiscal year based upon what we're seeing thus far. Capital connection fee revenues are at 68% of the amount budgeted. Operating expenditures are at 44.5%, less than the 50% that we would expect. The savings occurs in 2 categories: salaries and benefits, because there's 4.5 vacant positions within the water fund, and O&M accounts are less than. Operations and maintenance expenditures have been less than budgeted so far through December 31st. And debt service here shows that it's less than the anticipated 50% amount because we've only paid interest. We pay interest and principal in June, so we only pay the interest portion of our bond debt in December, so it's less than what you would anticipate. This is a summary of the city's wastewater utility. The wastewater operating revenues are at 49% of budget, just slightly less than budget expectations. Capital connection fee revenues are at 64%. Operating expenditures are significantly less than the 50%. They're at 39.7%. And that's related to 4 different categories: salaries and benefits. There's 4 vacant positions as of December 31st within the wastewater fund. Heat and power are less than expected. Specialized equipment and building and facility operations and maintenance are less than expected, and so are chemicals. This is a slide showing the city's debt coverage ratio. We're required to keep this bottom amount at 1.2%. You can see that as of December 31st, we weren't meeting it for the water fund. We have other reserve funds that we pull in order to help us meet that threshold, and we're allowed to do that per our bond covenants. But we always look at that in finance to see how much cash we have available. What this shows you is, as far as capital connection fee revenue, the water fund as of December 31st only had $397,000. The wastewater fund had $1.3 million. This is the annual debt service coming from connection fees for water and for wastewater, and then you do a calculation and come up with the bottom line here. And our bond covenants dictate that if we don't cover our debt coverage ratio, which is total operating and capital revenues minus all of the expenditures, etc., at 1.2, we'll raise rates. And we were at that point last year with the water fund. What this shows you, though, is that we only have about 3 months worth of debt service coverage in cash in the bank in our capital connection fee fund. In the wastewater fund, we've got about 1 year and 2/3. So we're much better positioned cash-wise to cover our debt service for capital connection fee debt service. In the water fund, not so much. So what we'll have to do in the water fund is draw down our available cash reserves from operating and capital projects in order to meet debt service until development picks up. And finance tracks that completely separately, so we know how much we're, in essence, borrowing from ourselves. But this is something I like to show City Council just as an awareness issue. With that, I will answer any questions you have.
Okay, you have overloaded us with numbers tonight. So any questions from council for Robin? Nope. Okay. Since it is our general item, I'd like to go ahead and open it to the public if there's any comments at this time as well. None? Okay, we'll bring it back to council. Thank you, Robin. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.